Hello students, Standard 8. In physics, we started the revision for chapter number 11, Force and Pressure, in which, as I told you in last session also, I will discuss about some questions along with the chapter which are written on the board here as an assignment, and after the video is finished you will write down the answers. You can take the help of the textbook. Now we learn about the forces. We saw that pull or a push on an object is known as force. So, anyhow we apply any action, it can be considered as either a pull or a push. So many actions we apply for the force. Except pulling and pushing, we lift the object, kick them, hit them, or pluck them, etc. But all of the actions are classified as either push or the pull. So, in science, a push or a pull on the object is known as force. And we saw that how the forces are come to play. We saw that the forces to come to play, there must be interaction between at least two objects. Without interaction, the forces cannot come into play. We saw that if you want to move the car, and if you stand behind the car, you will not be able to move that car. But for that, there must be interaction between a person and the car. So then if you push it, then the force can be applied and thus the car will move. Similarly, when you play that like the girls pulling and pushing, making the pair pudadi, in that also both are pulling each other. So, the forces are always in pair. Both the forces, both the objects apply the forces on each other. Then we saw that the forces, when more than one forces are applied, then the net force, which is the resultant force, is actually acting on the object. If the forces are applied, exerted from the same direction, then the forces are added. And when the forces are exerted from the opposite direction, then the net force will be as the difference of the two forces. Now, we also saw the effect of forces, that a force can change the state of motion. There are two types of state of motion, at rest and in motion. So if the object is at rest and we apply force, it can come, it may start moving. If it is already in motion and if we apply the force, it may change the speed, means either it can go faster or it can be slower also. Or it may change the direction of the motion also. Similarly, we saw that the force may change the shape of the object also. Now, today we are going to learn about the different type of forces. Means the forces can be classified in two main categories, that are the contact forces and non-contact forces. So, what is meant by contact forces and what is meant by non-contact forces? Contact forces means the action of the force takes place only when the two objects are in directly contact with each other. Then that type of force is known as contact force. It means that in contact force, the both should be directly in contact with each other. First, is the example is muscular force. What is muscular force? When you do different activities, like you pull the any table, or you drive a bicycle with your pedaling the bicycle with your legs, you do swimming, you pick up the heavy things, etc., in which you are using the force which is exerted by our muscles. So now, if you want to lift this book, can you, without touching, can you pick it up? No. If anything is lying on the floor and if you want to pick up, then without touching it, can you pick it up? It is not possible. So, when you push an object, or you take your bag, school bag, or lift a bucket of water, etc. Here, which force come from which place? That is the force that is in from your muscles. So, which is known as muscular force. So, the force caused by the actions of the muscles. The force caused by the actions of our muscles is known as muscular force. And muscular force can apply only when the two objects are in directly contact with each other, and therefore they are known as contact forces. So here the question was, what is muscular force? Why is it called contact force? So what is muscular force? The force exerted due to the motion of the muscles, right? The muscles, when the action is muscles, then it is known as muscular force. The muscular force enable us to do different activities. Whatever activities we do with our hand or legs, like walking, running, etc., lifting heavy objects, or riding a bicycle, etc. So all the actions, that activities that we do are due to our muscular force. Also, we use animals for their muscular force. For example, we use the bullock carts. The bullocks are pulling the carts. In here also, animals are using their muscular force. We use the bullocks in the field also, in the farms also, to pull that plow and etc. Here also, they are using their muscular force. So here also, as we saw that the muscular force are those forces which need to be in contact with each other. So muscular force is also a contact forces. Similarly, the other one is force of friction. What is force of friction actually? The force of friction is the force which is applied on the object when they are in motion, and it is always in the opposite direction of the motion. So we know that when we roll a ball on the ground, when the ball is rolling along the ground, then what happens? Gradually it slows down, and then it will stop after some time. Why? Because here we are not applying any force, but still it is slowing down. Similarly, when we stop pedaling a bicycle, if you are riding a bicycle and stop pedaling a bicycle, then what will happen? It also gradually slows down, and then if you don't pedal again, then it will stop after some distance. Similarly, when we switch off the engine, then also slowly the car or the bike will slow down and then it will stop. Here the force is applying in the opposite direction of the motion and then it is slowing down the motion, and that force is known as the force of friction. So the force responsible for the changing the state of motion of objects is known as the frictional force or the force of friction. It is the force of friction between the surface of the ball and the ground. When the ball is rolling on the ground and then gradually slows down. Why? Because there is a force of friction between the surface of the ground and the surface of ball, and therefore the ball is slowing down and come at rest. Similarly, friction between water and boat brings it to stop once you stop rowing. So when you are rowing the boat, it goes and on and on and on. But if you stop rowing, then what happens? The friction between the water and the surface of your boat starts, and therefore it slows down the motion and then gradually it will stop. So the force of friction always acts on all the moving objects and its direction is always opposite to the direction of motion. And here also we see that the both objects must be in directly contact. Force of friction cannot be applied without coming in contact, and therefore it is also a contact force. So here we saw that there are two types of contact forces we talked about, and that are the muscular force and the force of friction. And about force of friction you will learn more in the next chapter. Actually we already talked about it, but we will learn more in it. So we talked about the contact forces. Now the other forces are non-contact forces. Generally when we think about it, we wonder that without coming in contact, how can we apply the force? Generally our mind will not be able to understand that situation, that without coming in contact, without touching, how can we apply the force? It is impossible. But some of the forces are such that they can be applied without directly coming in contact with each other, and therefore they are known as non-contact forces. I hope everybody is familiar with magnets. What are the magnets? Magnets are those materials who can attract the magnetic materials like iron, nickel, cobalt. So they have power to attract them. So when the magnet attracts that iron pieces like the nails and etc., does it go directly in contact with them? No. When you take them nearer to them, but don't touch them, but they will attract it towards the magnet. So here force is exerted by magnet, but the magnet and that iron nails are not in directly contact with each other. And then also the force is applied. So what is that? That is a magnetic force, and that is a non-contact force. You can do the activity also that is shown on the page number 135. You have to take 2-3 pencils and put a magnet on it and take another magnet. We know that the magnet has two poles, north pole and a south pole, and there is interaction between the different poles are also there. We know that the like poles repel each other and unlike poles attract each other, and due to that interaction we can do this activity. Take 2-3 pencils, put it on the table and put a bar magnet on it. Take another bar magnet in your hand and bring the opposite poles, unlike poles, together. Then what will happen? It will attract that other magnet and it will roll itself without touching it, as shown in the figure. So you know that when the magnet are placed on the rollers, every time another magnet is brought near it. But you have to remember that if you bring the like poles, then it will go back, repel. So here, as I show you that this magnetic force is exerted without coming directly in contact. So it is a non-contact force. Then the other is electrostatic force. What is electrostatic force? We learn about the static electricity. Or generally, I hope everybody has done this activity. Take a plastic comb and rub it in your dry hair. And then bring it near the very small pieces of paper. Then what will happen? The small pieces of paper will be attracted toward that comb. Why? Similarly, there are other materials also, and when you rub them with each other, then they have a type of forces applying in it, and that is known as static force, electrostatic force. Here, when we rub them, they are getting charged due to the exchange of electrons. They are getting charged. One is getting positively charged, the other one is becoming negatively charged. And due to their charge, they have ability to attract that small thing. And that force is known as electrostatic force. Electrostatic force also come in play without touching each other. You can do activity like this. Take a plastic straw and cut it into nearly 2 equal pieces. Suspend one of the pieces from the edge of a table with the help of piece of thread as shown in figure, and rub its free end with a sheet of paper. Bring the rubbed end of the straw near the suspended straw. Make sure that the 2 pieces do not touch each other. Now, next, rub the free end of the suspended piece of straw with a sheet of paper, and again bring the piece of straw that was rubbed earlier with paper near the free end of the suspended straw. What will you observe? We saw that when we rub the straw with the paper, it is getting charged, and then such a straw is an example of a charged body. It is known as charged object. So the force exerted by this charged object is known as electrostatic force. So when we bring the same straw near to each other, they will repel because they will have the same electrostatic charge. If they have different, then they will attract each other. But when they have same electric charge, they will repel each other, same like the magnetic force. So what is electrostatic force? The force exerted by a charged body on another charged or uncharged body. Then that force is known as electrostatic force. And as electrostatic force come into play without coming to direct contact also. So it is a non-contact force again. So we learn about the 2 non-contact forces also, and that are the magnetic force and the electrostatic force. Now the last one, that is the force of gravity. We know that whenever we drop any objects from the height, then what will happen? They will fall down towards the earth. They are pulled toward the earth. It means that the earth is pulling the objects towards it, and that force is known as the gravity, force of gravity. Because whenever we anything, the fruits also fall on the ground when they are detached from the tree. So all objects or things that fall toward the earth, because the earth pulls them down, and then that force is known as force of gravity. It is always an attractive force. Here, that also without coming in contact with each other, and therefore it is known as the non-contact force. Water in rivers therefore flows downwards always because of the force of gravity. It cannot go up, but directly it can go down, because when we open a tap, the water falls down. So we are using the force of gravity, and our existence is also because of the force of gravity. Otherwise, how can we stand on the ground? So gravity is not actually only the property of the earth, but it is actually every object on the universe. They are exerting force on each other, and that is known as the gravitational force. Force of gravity is only that the earth pulls the object towards it, but gravitational force is universal. It means in the universe, each object, each two objects exert a force to attract them, and that force is known as force, gravitational force. So today we learn about the contact forces and non-contact forces and types of them, and so here we are going to finish the session. You will write down the questions, assignment answer in your notebook, and in any confusion write down in the comment section. Thank you very much.